So I don't review many recent or new books on this channel, and I thought it was worth talking about why. Why do I mostly read and review older classic fiction? A lot of booktube channels spend most of their time, at least, reviewing fairly modern fiction. You know, including a lot of stuff that's come out in the last year or two. It's especially true on sci-fi and fantasy focused channels in my experience, though I have seen it where I kind of cross over and see literary fiction and memoir channels and stuff like that. There's a real focus on newer material, and I think there's a few reasons for this, at least. I mean, there's one, which is that people are excited to find out what the next great books are. You know, what's the next Lord of the Rings or whatever in terms of its cultural impact. People want to be ahead of the curve and to discover stuff when it's fresh and to be excited about that. Another reason I can imagine is that people want to be part of the conversation. You know, let's say we're all talking about Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War, which I enjoyed anyway, as an example of a new book, and they're saying, "Oh, that's what everyone's talking about. That's what everyone's reading. I'll read it. I'll make a video. Then I'm part of the conversation." Those are very understandable reasons for reading a lot of new fiction. I don't, though. I mostly, as I say, I read and review chiefly older fiction. I think, on this channel so far, out of over a dozen reviews or something, I have reviewed 2 books from the last century, from the 21st century, or something like that. And I think there's 2 interconnected reasons, as far as I can think, about why that is. One, I don't have much time. I can read a book or 2 a week at the most, and I read a variety of books across genres. I read a lot of history, I read a lot of philosophy. So I've got a wide range of interests. Fiction is just one of them. I can only read so much fiction, so I need a sorting mechanism to help me pick that fiction and to make my choices in reading fiction good. And shortlisting books that lots of other people have liked and appreciated over a long period of time helps with that, because there's basically the older the book, the better for that purpose, because there's a wider range of views available. There is less recency bias. It's very natural that when a good book comes out and lots of people like it, you think, man, that sounds amazing, because they're all so excited. But naturally there'll be an assessment over time which will somewhat weight that initial enthusiasm and say, oh yeah, it was good, but it fits in here, not here. And so the older the book is, the less recency bias there is. And the book is more established in the wider discussion the older it is. It's more, we use the word canon sometimes, and I like the word, some people don't, but that's not, that it doesn't matter whether you like the word or not. The general idea of a canon, the idea there is a discussion of books from the past which form our cultural context in some ways. I don't think anyone disagrees with that side of it, even if they find it frustrating how the canon gets formed. So the older the book is, the more established the classic is, the more likely it is to be established in the canon in a way that is an important part of the conversation. Secondly, so-called classic books are, as I say, an established part of that wider discussion, the history or genre we're talking about. So I've just said that. They may have weaknesses as well as strengths. There might be things to criticise, but they are cultural touchstones. Think about, in my Conan review I talked about, because I really like Conan by Robert E. Howard, but there are things to do with race that I think are very much worth criticising. And these books, they're almost like family, basically. They are difficult sometimes, they're troubling sometimes, but they are unavoidable. They're part of our discussion, they're part of our history. They're, more recent books will join that literary family in time. It's hard to imagine Brandon Sanderson being completely irrelevant in 40 or 50 years' time, even if his position in the fantasy discussion is different to what it is now. But the sorting process is still going on. We don't know where everything's going to shake out. It can be fun to be part of that shaking out, part of that discussion. But the sorting out is still going on. So if I focus my limited time on those classic books, I come to understand just a little bit more about the story of the genre and, in a more general sense, our culture. Important and established works even help highlight cultural issues precisely because of how good they are. Edward Said when I reviewed Kim recently by Rudyard Kipling. Said, the great left-wing critic of Orientalism, wrote an introduction for Kim. He thinks it's great art, and precisely where it's great art, you can see in Said's view some of the problems with it. I'm not affirming or rejecting that. I'm saying that the better the art is, the more it can even highlight some of its own blind spots or weaknesses through its greatness. Their brilliance highlights their other vulnerabilities, allowing us to be able to discuss them more calmly and clearly and productively. So reading a lot of new fiction is, I think, fine, of course, but for both time reasons and for that wider point that I want to understand art history, culture, genre, by doing the archaeology, if you let me mix my metaphors a little bit, and appreciate the time-tested material. That's why I mostly read and review older books, classic books. What about you? Do you prefer new books or old books? What selection process do you have for how you pick your books? Tell me in the comments.